Welcome to Metals and Advanced Manufacturing, the podcast where innovation meets industry. I'm Jennifer Betts, an entrepreneur in the metals industry. With 2 decades of experience from leading roles at Fortune 500 companies to building my own businesses, I bring you conversations with the brightest minds shaping the future of metals, technology, and sustainability. From breakthrough materials to decarbonization strategies and cutting-edge manufacturing, we uncover how industry leaders are building a more efficient, responsible supply chain. Let's get started. Welcome to the latest episode of Metals and Advanced Manufacturing. This is a new podcast series that is going to broaden your horizon and focus to include everyone that's contributing to technological advancements in the metals industry, covering everything from AI to raw materials to manufacturing to decarbonization. We're going to be focusing on individuals that work in the industry who are innovating, providing new technologies, maybe even some new process along the way. They're going to be highlighting the challenges that our industry is reeling with these days and the innovations that they are utilizing to solve those problems and the value that they're bringing to the industry. On today's episode, I have a really incredible guest because he comes from a 6th generation company, which you don't typically hear these days. We have Timothy Hofmann. He is a vice president of operations at Frank B. Clayton's Son Incorporated. He is a 6th generation metal fabricator with almost 20 years of experience in the metals manufacturing sector. He is currently the vice president of operations at Frank B. Clayton's Son Inc., known as Clayton's in the Philadelphia metro area. Clayton's is a 126-year-old custom manufacturing facility that was originally known for its metal forming capabilities. Under Timothy's leadership, the company has seen rapid growth in recent years, expanding into verticals such as government, food processing, and prefabrication design. Timothy, I want to say a huge thank you for hopping on, taking time out of your day, and also congratulations for making it 6 generations in the company. That is pretty much unheard of, I would say, these days. So welcome to Metals and Advanced Manufacturing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. 6 generations, and I tried to avoid it. I went to school for horticulture and landscape design. That was delaying the inevitable, apparently, though.
No, they said no. You're coming right back into the industry. We'll let you get some outside experience and education, but no, coming back.
Little bit of dabbling. And a cool thing too is the same street we're on, there's a metal pipe bending company just up the street that has us beat by 2 years. They're not family owned and operated anymore, but a different family, but they have us beat by 2 years. So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty special. Maybe it's something in the water in that particular area, that neighborhood.
We like to say water. There's something in the water down here. But no, the company was started by my great uncle, Frank Clayton. He had the company for about 4 years. They started out horse and buggy in the middle of, if you're familiar with Old City, Philadelphia, like where the Liberty Bell is, where you couldn't put a manufacturing facility now. They were there. They started doing like copper gutters and what have you. 4 years in, he went swimming in the Delaware River, jumped in and broke his neck and did not survive. His kids were of young age, and his brother took over and ran the company until the kids were 18 years old, and then stepped aside and said, you're his sons, not me, and this is yours. The rest is history. My great aunt married his son, Frank Clayton Jr. They had no kids, and my great grandfather was a baker. He took over at one point, left the baking world for the metal world, and then my grandfather, my father, and then one day I'll hopefully take over if I'm lucky enough.
Wow. I have to commend the family history. That's pretty incredible values and integrity right there.
I don't think you'd see that today. I hope my brother, if it ever happened to me, would be kind enough to leave JP Morgan and swing on over and run the family business. But I don't know, but that I find the same feelings that you do. That was pretty amicable. It was a pretty cool thing to happen that I
Absolutely.
don't think you would say, especially to
No.
step aside. At that point, he ran the business for another probably close to 18 years. The kids were young. And I don't think it was like a smooth transition at 18 as though like he just walked away. He stuck around and all. So pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And also the baker and the family to transition from that industry over to the metal fabrication. Honestly, after learning a little bit more from a previous guest over on Bets on the Future, I do see some more similarities from the food science behind it and the metals production world. There
Yeah.
probably was some similarities there, but again, still quite a transition for the baker in your family.
Yeah. The interesting part too was so they didn't have kids, my Frank Clayton, the last one. And so when he died, his sister took over. And that's when he came in from baking because she was like, all right, I can take over, but I don't know any like these guys aren't going to listen to me. This is in the early 70s, I would say. So he was like ran day-to-day operations. But another cool part of our company history is she was the president from the 70s all the way, I think, into the 80s. And
That's
she did
amazing.
it. Yeah, she did it, man. She got a brain tumor in her 40s and lived till 98. She outlived like three doctors that said she was going to die, which that must be gratifying, right?
Yes, but also I feel like she should have been a case study.
Drinking Coors Light, wheeling her into Thanksgiving. She'd be there. She's great. And Peg Clayton.
That's amazing. I have to imagine that the 6 generations through multiple recessions, through variety of economic conditions, you didn't do the same thing to survive.
No.
So I'm kind of curious what you've come up with recently, because from a digital footprint, you are not blasting it out to everyone. You're known in your area and your specialty, kind of more, I would say, word of mouth.
For a long time, when I first, so I got into the office. So true to my grandfather's philosophy, no matter like you started on the floor, there was no, you could have went to school for rocket engineering and it didn't, you were picking up a broom, then you went to the shear, then you went to the punch, then you went to the press brake. There was like, and part of that I think was too that they wanted people to, so now it doesn't happen as much because a lot of stuff is all processed via CNC controls. But in the beginning, there was shearing. And then if the shearing was off, it would get to the brake. And the brake operator, my great uncle Frank, God bless him, he used to say, we'll lose it in the bending, right? That was his term for when a part was maybe cut out of whack, they would manipulate the dies. They would take more radius in or let radius out, and the piece would expand or contract with whatever they did. And there was tricks that they would do. And you don't have to do that now, but it's important for somebody that we like to take like our current, maybe a brake operator and get him to weld for a day. That way he sees how important it is that his parts line up and that the dimensions matter, because sometimes when they're just, maybe they're just a brake operator, it's the next guy's problem. And if you take a step over into the other side, you get a different perspective. So when I had to start on the floor, I worked out there for a solid almost 8 years, I guess. And then my great uncle, who was the vice president at the time, was going on vacation. And I was supposed to go in the office just to be an extra hand and help out. And my dad had a little issue the first day I was there. And basically, we couldn't come to work for the rest of the week. So I was thrown into running. No, there was no executives there. I was thrown into doing basically everything that they were doing by myself for a week. And it was, so when he came back, I was that was now my permanent role. I was in the office on a more engineering end and stuff like that. That was probably then took on a bigger role in 2013 is when we really started to take a look at the landscape, see what companies were out there, what we could do different than some of the companies and what we offered that they didn't. When we looked, it was really that we had an incredible capability to turn projects around in a very quick manner, 2-3 day lead times that took other people over a week to execute. Then We had at the time an analog inventory system that was done just via paper slips that were basically written. We had in the beginning, when I first got in the office, it was an actual physical ledger that somebody would handwrite drops in. So I got rid of that. We got an Excel spreadsheet. And then my cousin who works there is very capable with coding and writing script and all. And he was like, give me that. And we're going to turn this into a digital inventory system that we can manage. The cool part about that when you're doing your own is that unlike buying a product from a bigger SaaS company or something, we got to literally build it out of constraint and necessity. So we didn't have stuff we didn't need because we didn't have the money to put out to do all of it. And we didn't have, the tools were so curated to our needs that it helped with the speed. And if you have essentially every drop logged and every sheet logged in the shop, you can start to then take parts and start nesting them in the sheets that were already paid for off the drops and really move forward that way. Fast forward to 2020, we started to have it cloud-based and more of a better, just we've had it at that point for 6 years. It was really honed in to where I had some interest from customers that were like, hey, can I look at your inventory system? Any way we can get an inventory system like that. At the same time as that, we were really trying to scale the business, and it became, I got to either start a SaaS company in the middle of trying to scale a 120 something year old company. And scaling it is probably the right word, but it was also that for a long time, like you said, word of mouth, we were also played like as a middleman where a lot of companies, even some of the top companies in the country for custom manufacturing were coming to us for forming. We were forming it. A couple months later, Fabricator magazine would run like this article. And I'm like, dude, I bent that. You didn't bend that. And not that it was an ego thing, but I'm like, man, if we're doing this, what are we doing? So I want to really focus not as much on the aspect of the inventory that, all right, now it's time to, let's get out of everybody's shadow. Obviously there's enough space in here for everybody and let's see what we can do. So we brought more people into the office, I hate to say this because I know the lean guys are going to be like, oh, you got to be all in, but I still think you can take lean principles and really start to trim. So we're in a commoditized business. So how do we get to monopoly, right? And I know that's a dirty word, but realistically, nobody says, I shouldn't say it, the government's in the middle trying to break them up, but like Google's a great example. Like you can call them a monopoly, but in what? Video, search, technology with Gemini. They're hard to define, but the point of that is I find that is the business model. Competition is going to bring you down. It's a race to the bottom. It's a race to try to keep up with the Joneses. And if you can kind of find a niche and then go after it and monopolize it, I think it's beneficial. So we started really, how do we focus more on speed? So we start cutting out all the crap in between the operations. Obviously, whatever I do, anybody else can do. So then we were like, how do we get quicker with quoting? And we were trying to figure out ways to just streamline the whole process. So first we started with, everybody started modeling. I guess what we did differently was we modeled from the beginning. So if Jennifer Betts sent in a quote and it was on a piece of paper and it was a rectangle with 4 holes in it on a 1/2-inch plate, we took that drawing and modeled it because that's how we put it out to our guys. So my father was getting older and he didn't want to learn CAD and he didn't want to acclimate to these things. So we're like, but he has 40 something years, almost 50 years now of quoting knowledge. And it's like, how do you extract that? Right. And how do you not stop the pace of the company?
Yeah.
So we found a company called Paperless Parts out of Boston, and they sent down first an email and they were like, this is what we do. And it was a little video. And I'll be honest, I watched the video and I saw it, but I'm like, man, like they were showing us like parts that were more machined. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to fit for us. So then they had the salesman reach out, this guy Gleb, and he was great. And he was like, hey, listen, these guys use it. These are sheet metal companies. These are the kind of things you need. Do you mind if I stop down and I'll see what you guys have and we'll see if it's a fit? I said, sure, let's set something up. And a week later, he happened to be in the area. He was like, hey, let me swing down if you don't mind. and they're from Boston. So he shows up with Dunkin' Donuts and their logo slapped on the donut thing. And I'm realizing now, telling you this, that the logo is the same color as the Dunkin' Donuts color. So I'll have to, I'll have to bring that up to him.
It's part of the plan.
Yeah, it is. It's a
for
Boston
sure.
conspiracy. But after I sat down with him, we talked, and I'm like, man, this guy seems solid. My cousin that does all the coding for us, he was like, listen, I can take all of our, we had at the time, they were created in the 50s. They were basically quoting tables where you would just, maybe the part was 10 gauge and it was 120 inches long and it was 15 of them. And that was $5 a bend or whatever. So we had all this data analog, but didn't have it digitized. So we started digitizing it and giving it to these guys. And I gotta say, and this makes me sound like a fanboy, but I think it's a testament to the power of one, the technology we have now. And as manufacturers, I think, and I'll tell you the story, how the story of the company, how it started after this, because it will make a lot more sense. But like the quoting is just like the bread and butter of everything. If you can get the quote to the customer faster, right? It's just like getting the job faster and getting it out faster and getting the money in faster. Sales and distribution is my only option, or I create a product. But right now I'm a custom manufacturer that builds what people bring to me. So that's not what I have. I have like we talked about, the inventory and stuff, which is a virtual product. So it's sales and distribution. This quoting software allows us to take complex parts and assemblies and quote them in minutes.
And this was digitized in 2020, you said?
Paperless Parts is a separate company,
Right.
aside from my inventory.
Yeah.
But so we started digitizing stuff in 2020 with our stuff. But then once we hooked up with them, we're only 4 months in with them.
Oh, wow.
And I think in 4 months we've quoted, and that's the other cool thing, the real time in quotes, over 4 million in quotes, right? You get to see what your win, your loss rate is. And then the cool part about that is we can now reconcile with the orders and the time that was actually on the job and see where the quoting software is maybe quoting high or low. And mind you, if it's quoting high or low, it's our fault because it's our inputs, right? So if it's not, they just create the platform for you to put your inputs into, or they help you put them in, I should say. But it allows us to quote like complex assemblies in minutes. And it does, I like to call it like a power rule. Everything seems to work on an 80-20 kind of spread. And it does, it quotes about 80% of the job and the final 20% you have to do, whether it's real time, material cost, any kind of deliveries or logistics charges with it.
Versus in the past, it was 100%. You had to go to those, I'm assuming they were paper, analog sheets.
I used to have to write, my quotes would be on a piece of paper and I'd write MT, SH, or LS for shear or laser, depending on how it was cut. And then a BD for bend. And then like a whatever sanding post-processing. And then some of them were out of a quoting book, but then the other ones were like, oh, how long would it take to do that? So that's where the cool story of how Paperless Parts started was their, I guess, co-founder, Jason Ray, was in the Navy, was a parts procurement officer and had so much trouble getting parts for the boat. So he's, man, when I get out of the Navy, I'm going to buy a manufacturing company. Long story short, I guess he goes out and every place he goes to buy, he goes, all right, how do you quote the jobs? And the answer is some guy sitting there going, after you do it for a couple of years, you'll get the feel for it. So he takes however much money he raised, goes back to the people he raised the fund from and goes, I couldn't buy a company. And they were like, what's up? He laid out the issues he had. And I guess one of the investors pulled him aside and says, it looks like we found the company then. So he creates this software and you essentially have to give it all the inputs to put in. Like my cousin Randy likes to say, garbage in, garbage out. If you gave him a bunch of crappy inputs, I don't think it'd be the best output, but we gave them top tier inputs and we got such good value from it that we then coded an ERP that piggybacked on top of it. So you'll get to see that now what we do is essentially an order comes in or a quote comes in we model it. If they don't have a model, we model it. We put it in the quoting platform, then gives us a quote number. We put the quote number in our ERP that we built in-house, which then creates a digital work order of itemized. If it's an assembly, it breaks down the assembly and then tells you all the parts to it. And then each part, it tells you the steps to do for the parts. It has a little box from the check off and initial. So it's not even like complicated. It'll be, if you're making a machine stand and the base is 1/2 inch stainless, it'll tell you, all right, this part gets laser cut, then put through the time saver for a medical grade finish. And then they sign off on it. And then after that, it goes to inspection, signs off on it. Then the guy at shipping receiving will scan the top of it, print out the receipt packing slips for it. So we're trying to get it to the point where, I like the last time we talked, that we're probably less than a half a year out from a buy now button, which hopefully is like an Amazon effect.
Which the buy now button, to those that are listening that may not be very familiar with the metals and manufacturing world, that's kind of heard of / at least at the bare minimum uncommon in our world for the very specific reasons that you talked about, because every job is so specific. It's very detail oriented at the bare minimum, plus everything prior to that is very analog. It's paper. It's in a spreadsheet at best, right? It's not in an ERP system. It's not going to be in anything automatic. It's not anywhere near what you've talked about up until
I
this
love that
point.
you said at best in a spreadsheet, because that is the truth. It is.
Right.
If you ran into somebody with a spreadsheet, you were like, whoa, what are you doing here, man? Right? Like, how'd you come up with this?
Which is, it's kind of sad to say that we were like congratulating someone for, yay, you got it in a spreadsheet. Meanwhile, like every other industry out there is like instituting AI and putting spreadsheets out the door. And we're just like, yay, we got it off of paper.
It's tough too that you bring that up though, because it's not, so we are seeing like growth and we're seeing good returns on that investment. But believe it or not, it's still hard to ask your customer. So we know when a drawing, so if we receive a PDF from a customer and it's got that nice isometric view at the top, right-hand side, and all these other indicators that this was done in a 3D model, we'll say, hey, any chance we can get the step file? Only because, not that I don't mind drawing it, and believe it or not, that our quoting software, Paperless Parts, will accept PDFs and DXFs. There's a little bit more legwork that has to go in. The worse the file, the more legwork you have to put in, right? So that's why we pushed 3D, because it lets it eat. But we'll say to customers, hey, any chance of getting that step file? Oh, I don't know. Can't you just use the PDF? And it's, yeah, I can. Or I can give you an exact number, which I will say I love, and I don't know if maybe this is common. I find that it's not always common, but I was raised through the company to honor the quote. Like the quote I gave was always the number. It was never not the number, but now the confidence of the number is strides night and day. It's very different. That I know when I put out a number, I'm not even going home. I can put out, I think when we first got the program, about a month and a half into it, I put out like a $450,000 quote with it and went right home, right to bed. Where normally I'd be in bed like in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning. Did I put grinding on those 700 parts at all? Because in the aggregate, that stuff adds up, right? But
Real quick.
you don't have to do that with this, because if you put in a model and 10 parts make up the assembly, it grabs all 10 parts. You just check off the couple boxes that allow you to do it. And we try to get that through to the customer, and it'll be called, so fbclaytons.com is our website, but we'll have another one out where it'll be sheetmetal.parts, and that's where you'll be able to, customers, if they have a 3D model, will be able to put it in, and it'll be less than a 24-hour return on the quote, with a buy now button, with a pack, where's it going, shipping, the whole 9 yards, all can be added in right there. Which, if there's anybody's purchased anything off Amazon, you go in looking for a pair of suspenders and you leave with a lot more just because of that button that you can buy now. So
Yeah.
it's exciting. It's exciting.
when you go to look for anything in the metals, construction, fabrication world, and you're not in that world, if you start to Google that, search it online, it's real challenging to find those companies, those local companies, to figure out who does what in your area, because
Yep.
those buy now buttons don't exist. It's not something that our industry has had the ability to utilize in the past.
Why do you think that is, though?
The issues, like a combination of a lot of the issues that you've talked about. One, it's the paper mentality. We just haven't transitioned a lot of the smaller businesses to the digitization, right? The next step is everything is so custom. It's very challenging. Then you also talked about the specific files. You have to have very specific files and confirm those files and approval process. So it starts to quickly add up where there are several trigger points where errors can occur very quickly. And I think that's what probably stopped a lot of people from just even going down that path and saying, you know what, no, we just need it to be B2B, need to have the salespeople remove anything that could possibly get in the way and just have somebody just do the sales on this.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate because, like I said, in a commodity business, if you really sales and distribution are your only angle, unless you have a product that you're the sole proprietor of, you're in a crowded market with a lot of people. And to your point, like you Google metal fabrication in Philadelphia and you'll see companies come up. And I'm not trying to poo anybody, but I know who they are. We've been around the block long. I'm like, that's not the guy that you're calling for what that came up for, what you Googled would, So I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of hesitation towards technology, a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation of like failure too. So that if it didn't work somewhere, it's not the end of the world. So that's why I think that's the cool part of having some of the things that we've been able to have is that like with being able to code in-house, we've had the opportunity to mess around, find things that work to the point, like I said, where the inventory system is, I can track every piece of metal in my shop from anywhere I'm at right now. I can turn it over here, pull up my other screen on here, pull in my inventory and just tell you where anything is. And I had dinner with one of the regional managers at Alro a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this kind of stuff. And I talked about my inventory system. I said, I'd like you to look at it. Maybe you guys will buy it. And he goes, what makes you think yours is better than ours? I was like, because I built, not me, listen, we built ours. You didn't. You bought it. And I think these things are cheap. Granted, we had to have the knowledge of how to code, but I don't think people realize for $20 a month, $30 a month, and as a business, if you're talking $200 a month as a small business, to be able to know where your inventory is at, to be able to log it, to be able to check it. We click on here. I can click on any sheet in here right now and pull up where it came from, what vendor. Right here, I'm looking at the comments so it must have been a laser cut piece on this piece of aluminum. It says sheets L-shaped. It was moved from rack A6 to B12. The price is $250 a pound, purchased from Arrow on June 7th of 2023. And that rides. And now everybody that's on there, and if I can hit detail, I can find the employee that logged it, who cut it, if there's issues. But this was done by a guy that dropped out of college and a guy that went to school for landscape design. Like it's not, but that's also, I think we've talked about before. I think the constraints help people innovate too, right?
Yeah.
We needed this. We were doing things on paper, things were getting lost. Every bit of human interaction meant a chance for error. And I love humans. I'm pro-human, but meaning like anytime somebody touched it, how do we limit the times guys touch it? And we've done the same thing now. I'll send you some pictures. It's not the fanciest looking thing, but we were like, let's do a digital job board up on the wall, big TV. And it'll say, here's the jobs and here's what everybody's on. So that was the first thing we were like, all right, cool. And the jobs will go from like green the job numbers would get to red as the closer to the due date. So we were all gone home. We're going to do this. And then my cousin was like, you know what? Why don't we just do a physical one? And he said, we'll get a physical job board and clipboards and we'll color coordinate them. And these will be blue, green, red, and yellow, and red being the highest priority, green being no priority. And then we'd have clipboards that would be essentially a job rider. And if the part started on the laser, they'd all go to the laser. So you'd have this pile of clipboards at the laser.
Oh.
And after the job was on the floor, besides the records in the office, there was no real way to keep track of it unless you walked the floor
Mm-hmm.
to go out and find it. So right by where the office is, we'll build a big board, 8 feet high, 12 feet long. It'll have all the slots vertically for clipboards, and we'll get the clipboards color coordinated. So we design the thing and model it up, print out all the drawings for the guys start making it. We started to mess around with the ERP and the processes. So the information we pulled off paperless parts allowed us to say, there's an hour's worth of bending here. There's 40 minutes worth of laser cutting, 2 hours worth of finishing. So now we have a time log. So we got it to accrue all that time and then put a total job time at the top. And it said maybe 3 hours. So we're like, cool, that'll tell us and we'll figure out what dictates that. So then I go home and just like any good father, I'm doing my math homework with my daughter because my wife's, you do math all day, you're better at it. And of course, I am not better at it. And I don't do math. I play on a computer that does the math for me. But she had a multiplication table. And if you've seen kids with these, they're color coordinated, right? And she's going down and she's flying through this thing. And I'm looking at it, I still don't even understand it. And I'm like trying to wrap my head in. I'm like, I start to pick it up and I see all the colors. So I go into work and I show my cousin the paper. I'm like, we need this for the clipboards. So he's like, brilliant. So the left side, he goes down the left side are days remaining. To the right, going across are hours remaining on the job. Then it populates it and color coordinated it all. So now it tells you, you got 3 days to the due date. You got 8 hours worth of work. This is a yellow clipboard. The yellow clipboard, now it starts in laser and goes in the laser column. But by moving the board there, now the board came right in front of the office. We have a camera on it. So everybody has a monitor up with the board on it and they can see where the jobs are at as they flow through the shop visually. We also have that now backed up digitally, which we're about to roll out to have our customers have access to. So they'll be able to see they'll send the drawings in. They'll see that the drawings get processed. So it'll come up and I'll send you some pictures of this because we already use it internally. It hasn't been to them yet. Where it'll come up and now it's a screen. It'll say Jennifer Betts Metals. And here's the drawings. These drawings were suitable for quoting, but not for production. And a quote was issued. Status is awaiting approval and new drawings. But eventually the customer now is going to be able to say, it's essentially, we're the project managers without project managing. As long as we do our job, the communication lines will be open. They'll be able to drop in on their projects, see where they're at. And we're not there yet, but the next step after that is to then digitize every machine in the sense of an iPad. So right now, on the side of this visual workboard is another board that has all the employees' names and then all the processes in the company. And there's red dots next to each process that each employee can perform. So they go through, and we had years of foremans, and our building is kind of awkward. It's not the best layout. There's a wall in the middle. There's ways to get around, but there's a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And what tended to happen was our most skilled employees ended up on the right side of the wall, which would be where the laser was at and the finishing of the product. And all the forming and the shearing and some other odds and ends we could done on the left side. But there was people, it just didn't work, right? And we'd have a foreman and he'd always be on the right side, and then he'd never know what was going on the left side, and then he'd get frustrated. So it's like, man, how do you not talk? How do you not communicate, but communicate as much as possible? And that's when we're like, no foreman will have department leads of the areas. So what we do there is the best guy and like the best operator in that, whether it's the brake forming or the laser operator, the head guy then takes over that. And really all they do is keep the area neat.
Yeah.
But then everybody else just works the board, which is they go, nobody has to tell them what to do next. The orders are color coordinated for priority. So if you're able to work finishing and forming, and there's 5 red jobs in finishing and nothing in forming, you don't even need to be told what to do.
Right.
You just take that job and go. But the next step is to bring these iPads out. We already have a couple in the shop. Bring them out to each station. So then the employee now will go on, log on to a job, and it'll say, Jen, you're only qualified to bend these 4 jobs on this break. Jen, you're only qualified to laser cut these 8 jobs on the laser. What would you like to do? You just start picking them, whatever's in the highest priority. Then we'll have the digital timestamp as well, which then we can really start to collect all the data, start to find out what parts of the shop are lacking, look into why they're lacking, how we can help bring them up to speed, into the Marie Kondo of business, which I think is look around your shops. What value does that bring your customer, whether it's a process, a machine, even an employee? What value are they bringing? And if it's not, it's got to go, right? And then even if it's just open space, one that's safer, if it's an old machine that's not in use, I think sometimes what we tended to do is get involved in projects we shouldn't have been because we had this old tool that could do it. And it's, you could do a lot of things, but it's not efficient and it put other business at risk.
Yeah.
So now getting these processes straightened out and getting everything trimmed out allows us to operate freely and fast.
I go back to the parenting moment because I appreciate that you were talking about doing homework with your daughter because I can very much relate to that. And thinking about when you're ordering pizza and on the app, you can see where the pizza is in the process. And yet for most people, when they're placing an industrial order, something in the manufacturing world, you don't get that. You have to call, you have to email, you have to follow up. There's nothing that you can watch, if you will. And yet you are telling me that you're basically providing that.
Give them now updates.
Yeah.
We do. There's a download button and we send them the PDF, but we are going to get to the point where Jen's, hey, where's my stuff at?
You're like,
There you go.
yeah, it's in this process.
Part of the reason came up is out of constraints and necessity, we buggered up a job. First, what came in was an email saying, here's the drawings. We need to get moving on this. And I responded, okay, I'm heading off to vacation. Let's kick it over to my other guy and he'll get on it. And I hit send. And then an email came back and said, hey, I told you this is the job we were sending the templates for. The drawings aren't correct. So we never opened the drawings.
Ooh.
The templates come, we start processing all the templates and we're getting ready to ship. And they're like, where's the rest of the stuff? And I'm like, what rest of the stuff? And they're like, there was all these parts. And I'm like, you told me not to open the email. Like the email was incorrect. So we didn't even open it. We waited for the templates. We made the templates. And so it was a confusion, right? Or a miscommunication. It was a miscommunication because we're such good partners together. We did a fatal mistake and made an assumption that I assumed he knew what I was talking about. He assumed I knew what he was talking about. And we both made asses out of each other, right? So we were like, shit, how do we stop this? So my cousin's desk is, there's no offices. There's offices, but they're all open. Like my desk faces my dad's desk, whose faces my cousin's, who faces me. And we're all right there. And my cousin's screen and my screen oppose each other so we can both look over and communicate. And he said, what we need, and this is the backdrop of, this is actually what you would look like if you're looking at me in my office. Let's put a big board there and we'll put the projects on there and when they're in here, and he did this whole thing and we were going to go to Staples and print it. And I'm like telling my wife about it on the drive home. I'm like, cause I'm bummed that the project is, I was pretty nervous. It was for University of Pennsylvania, which is a big school in Philadelphia. And we were like, man, this was not a good look. And that was the most disappointing thing to me. So I'm telling my wife, Tara, about it. And she works for a shipping company and it's the #1 shipping company in the world. So it's a fairly big company. She's like, we're doing this. And I just wish, damn it, that we could have our customers look at this, but nobody can do this or that. And she's complaining about basically what I'm complaining about, but she's complaining about it before it gets to the mistake that I made. So I'm like, shit, I can do that. And we get into work the next day. And I said, that thing you did that we were going to print out at Staples, let's make that digital. And my cousins, I was like, we want them to see everything. Because now, as somebody, I assume you're busy. Every time I'm on LinkedIn, you got 10 things going on. She's here, she's there. Imagine, though, not being able to follow up on all of the calls that you need to make.
Yeah.
Or now that it's in there, they can go about their day and be busy and know that, hey, when I get home, I can check in on my portal and make sure my job's in production. And if it's not, I can do it first thing in the morning and I can find out why not, or I can say,
Yes.
oh, cool. It's being formed and I know that it doesn't get painted. So I know I'm a couple days out from being product in hand.
Yeah.
And it keeps us honest on our lead times too.
Yeah. That's huge from a manufacturing standpoint, is making sure that it is getting done on time, because the item that they're doing for you is not the only thing that they're worrying about, right? That's just a part and a bigger piece that they're working on. So it's obviously something that's very important to them, but they're still managing a bunch of other items and it's just one piece in their day. So for them to take 2 seconds to be able to log in, check to see where it is, check that it's on time, great, awesome, fantastic, and know that they don't have to worry about it and boom, keep going. Great. Because how many times have you looked to make sure that your package is on time, right? In your personal life? You do that all the time.
Yep.
And yet we can't do that in the manufacturing world.
And imagine if you had to email UPS and wait for a response, or call UPS to see where it's at, or call FedEx to see if it's shipped from Xinjiang, China yet. Like
Yes.
it's, and that's like a lean principle. It's like communication is what you want,
Yes.
right? But how do you communicate without the clutter of communication
Yes.
and because let's be honest, it happens in emails, just like it happens in text messages where people assume something, or maybe they
Mm-hmm.
thought the tone and they're like, oh man, is he really busy or am I bothering him? You don't even have to worry about that. It's, man, I just logged in. All Jennifer's work is where it's supposed to be. Or, hey, why is my job not started? And why does it say that we don't have the files? And it's great for management not to keep tabs in it. Hey, because to your point, I got 7 projects. Did my guys send out the jobs that they were supposed to? Or for me, who left the office today at 12, had a meeting at 2, talked to you at 5. And if I could just log on to make sure, hey, my guys got the drawings over to the customers that they needed. These parts are in production where they need to be. These
Yep.
drawings, we're waiting on them, and it's good. And it keeps me fresh. If I'm in a meeting and where are we at with this or that, I don't have to prepare for the meeting to leave either, saying, all right, let me go check on all these jobs before I go, because I know Jen's going to bring up where are my parts for this, that, and this. And I need
Mm-hmm.
to know. Now I can say, hey, Jen, here's the computer screen. There's where they are. And then in 6 months, I'm going to be able to say, hey, Jen, here's your portal login. You can see where they're at.
Yep. Exactly. And speaking of 5 o'clock, it is actually 6 o'clock where you are. And before we go, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about before we head out?
So I'm sure as soon as this ends, I'll email you and be like, remember, we should have talked about this. Yeah, maybe we can do it again. But no, I hope people realize that there's a lot more tools at their disposal. And the fact that I'm 6th generation is a testament to the people that came before me, because the pricing tables that we used were built in the 50s. And at the time, they were the AWS and all the high-end AI of the time. So somebody put in the effort and the money then. I hope people start to take advantage of some of the stuff they have out there, so that I'm not the only person in my 6th generation. Because like you said, most of them fail after 3, honestly, or in the 3rd, but we're not there, and hopefully we won't be.
Yeah. Or they get bought out. There's been a lot of consolidation in recent years. So it's pretty cool to see that you are still family owned, 6th generation. For those that want to get a hold of you, the best way is either from the website or LinkedIn.
LinkedIn's the best way. Instagram, we're at FB_Claytons. And yeah, my email is tim@fbclaytons.com. That's mine. You can get me.
Tim, I really want to say thank you for all of what you've been doing, what you've been building. It's a testament to sixth generation that you've been adapting, you've been innovating. It's really impressive to see what you're implementing in the metals and especially the advanced manufacturing side of things. This is Timothy Hofmann, Vice President of Operations at Frank B. Clayton Sons Incorporated in Philadelphia. Thank you so much for hopping on the Metals and Advanced Manufacturing podcast.
Jen, thanks so much.
Thanks.